Tonight again, Exposing Islam's New War on Christians. Raymond Ibrahim wrote the book, and he's here with us right now. Raymond, good to see you.
Thank you, Pat. Thanks for having me.
Hey, what's the deal? What's going on over there?
What's going on is an old story is reliving itself, which is basically the persecution of Christians under Islamic domination. You know, most people aren't aware from a historical point of view that in the 7th century, when Islam came into being, more than half of the entire world's Christian population lived in those countries that now we call the Arab world. And those countries were taken by the sword. People were forced to convert or compelled to convert or actually fled and ran away. And that's the true story of how Islam came to being. And so what we're seeing right now is basically the culmination of that early history, because we see even the same exact patterns. I'm a historian and I read the early primary texts in Arabic. And what you see happens is attacks on churches, attacks on people who are blaspheming Muhammad, attacks on Muslims who wish to apostatize and become Christians, and all numbers of different patterns. And then when you look in the book, for example, and I fast forward to today, and you'll see the same exact patterns. And what's even more remarkable is you'll look at this, it's from Morocco to the west, Indonesia to the east, sub-Saharan Africa, Turkey, Central Asia. All of these countries are different races, different nationalities, different languages, different ethnicities, different political, economic situations, and yet we're seeing the same identical pattern. So what is the common denominator? It's Islam.
You know, I was talking to our expert on Islam, and he mentioned the fact that in the early writings of Muhammad, he was trying to say that Muslims should pray toward Jerusalem. He was trying to curry favor with the Jews. The Jews rejected him as the Messiah, and he turned on them. And what happened to all those verses in the Quran?
Well, that's an interesting point, and it goes to actually a little-known doctrine in the West that's fundamental to the way Muslims understand the Quran. It's called, in Arabic, al-nasikh wal-mansukh, which means abrogation. And the fact is, in the early years of Muhammad's career, as you're pointing out, he was peaceful, he preached wonderful things. You'll find Quranic verses about Christians that are kind and they sound well. And then he became, on a historical level, stronger, more powerful. And at that point, he went on the war path, and then all of a sudden Allah started revealing hostile verses.
But obviously they're totally counter to one another, so they call it abrogation.
Abrogation means whatever happens and whatever verses are revealed in Quran's later career, abrogate the earlier one. So if Allah said be kind to Christians in the year 620, and by 640 he said go on war, and then Muhammad died right around then that is the final revelation. That's the ultimate worldview. But then again, you can be kind and you can speak well if you are in the same circumstances that Muhammad was when he was weakened. And therefore, if you have outnumbered Muslims and they're weakened and they're around Christians and non-Muslims, they should follow that original paradigm of being nice and being tolerant.
Incredible. But that's, I mean, that is just intellectually dishonest, but people, they buy that.
Sure, it's because it's understood as a divine prerogative. It's offered.
Right, well, what is the prevailing doctrine now that they say, having abrogated those nice verses, what do they do with the other ones?
The ultimate prevailing worldview of Islamic law, according to all 4 mainstream schools of Sharia law, is basically that the Islamic world must always be at war with the non-Muslim world until it subsumes it and subjugates it. And that's how it all began. In the 7th century, Islam was a small part of Arabia. Then it expanded, as I was pointing out earlier, conquered all those lands. And that view of conquering the world and bringing it under Islamic hegemony never changed. That's considered part of the Islamic worldview with scriptural backing.
Dar al-Harb and Dar al-Islam, yeah. I mean, yeah, but how could somebody like George Bush come out with that statement that he said it's a religion of peace? I mean, how absurd can that be? And I was attacked for saying he didn't know what he's talking about.
It's because, you know, there's so much, as you're pointing out, the mainstream media exists, in my opinion, to just validate its own narrative, which really has nothing to do with reality. It's an alternate reality.
I love it, to validate its own reality.
Yeah,
okay.
They've created a narrative, and their job is to validate it, and then most people listen to it, and then in the end, what's happening in the real world is in no way, shape, or form applicable to what we're seeing. And that's why a book like Crucified Again, if a person reads it, they're just going to be mind-boggled, because they never if they're just following the mainstream media, they would have no idea that this sort of thing's happening.
You pointed out in one case, I believe it was in Egypt, where the police were shooting tear gas into a church to support a mob fighting the Christians.
Right. And this wasn't just any church. It was the most important holy site of all of Coptic Christianity, where it's believed, it was founded by Saint Mark of the Gospel. And even under Mubarak, of course, there were attacks on Copts, but that area was so well protected, and even a pebble was thrown towards it. It's residence of the Coptic Pope. And now you have mobs, and we have them on video throwing Molotov cocktails, opening fire, and the military is standing by when it's not throwing its own tear gas in there.
Well, if Saddam Hussein was protecting the Christians in Iraq, and possibly the Assad, at least they were against the Muslim Brotherhood, is there any place in the Arab world where Christians are safe anymore?
Well, it's basically wherever the Arab Spring comes, which is articulated in the West through a Western paradigm as a wonderful thing. It's people who want liberty and democracy, and we project our secular views onto them. And then you find out, no, what they want is liberty from the yoke of dictatorship, so they can bring about the Islamic worldview, the Islamic way. Islamic Sharia literally means Islamic way. And so in Iraq, we went in there, first thing you know, Christians have been decimated. More than half of the indigenous Christian population is either dead or has fled. In Libya, Gaddafi, not a great guy, obviously. The Obama administration supported the Al-Qaeda-linked terrorists. They got rid of him. Then, as reward, we got the consulate attack on Benghazi. And now the very small few churches and religious orders in Libya are being attacked left and right, and this is unprecedented for Libya. And Syria now, you go there, and Christians actually were treated pretty well. They're at least 10% of the population. Now you have the jihadis that the Obama administration is supporting. And the same story that happened in Iraq is now coming to Syria, where by the droves, they're fleeing.
What can Christians in the West do to help these people?
I think the first thing is, because of all the dissembling and undermining from the mainstream media, the first thing is actually to get proper knowledge. Because most people are just so, and that's why I actually wrote the book Crucified Again, because I'm trying to give the knowledge that I'm trying to fill a vacuum that the mainstream media has woefully neglected, if not.
You're fluent in Arabic, you're fluent in the Quran, you're fluent in the history of this. I mean, this is your field, this is your life's work.
Yeah.
And why won't the media open their eyes? They won't do it.
It goes back to this idea, look, if Muslims and jihadis attack Israel, and if they attack the West, it's easy for the mainstream media to get over it. You know why? Because they'll just say, well, look, they're the outnumbered underdog, they're frustrated, they have to do whatever they have to do to fight back. But when Muslims go and attack minorities living under their hegemony, who just want to go to church and pray, and who have no political power, they're ostracized and they're poorer, and they're being attacked, how then do you justify that? It becomes very clear that the animus is purely religious intolerance. And then it also, if you connect the dots, well, then maybe that's what's fueling the rage against Israel. Maybe that's what's fueling the rage against the West. So I think the attack on Christians is in many ways the Achilles heel of the narrative of Islam as a religion of peace.
Well, it's obvious it's alive.
Yeah.
Crucified Again. Where can they get this?
This can be got on Amazon or any bookstores.
Okay, there it is. Crucified Again, ladies and gentlemen, by an expert. It's a sad narrative. You read it and you think this can't be happening, but it's happening all over the world. The birthplace of Christianity, where the majority of the people were Christians, and now less than 10%, 6%, 5%, they've been systematically destroyed by these so-called religionists of peace. Raymond Ibrahim. Thanks, Raymond.
Thank you very much, Pat. Appreciate it.